I know you like the polite decorum I displayed in a different forum. We're alone now, so can I just level? You're really leaving me a bit disheveled. Whoa, 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 I like your nose. Whoa, 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 and your pantyhose. Whoa, 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 I like your knees. Come on, baby, pretty please. I know you like my distinguished bearing, considerate to a fault and caring. Well, Dr. Jekyll may be very formal. Well, good evening, my dear friends and colleagues and associates and some ne'er-do-wells and hangers-on around town, across the country, and everywhere around the globe. Tonight, Public Affairs, Public Access. I am your host, Paul Colby. It is the 13th of March in the year 2014, in case you were watching this on some sort of archived media. So, it's just about the Ides of March once again, and here we are talking about current events. On this show, as you know if you've tuned in before, we really talk about the undercurrent of events. In other words, that which you do not hear about in the mainstream media, or that which is poorly reported or underreported or ignored in the conventional media because it just doesn't fit the paradigm, and sometimes it's just too way out. But here we are at that time of year that we call daylight savings time. And I know that it's hard to get used to at first, but once you do get used to it, it's terrific. You have a little more time after you leave the office, if that's what you do, to go out and mow the yard or do or not do some other task that the husband or wife has suggested that you do, or do something with the kids or the dog while there's still some sun out there. But you know, I've been thinking about it a lot lately. This is one of the things that's going on now, and I'm going to be talking about things that have just recently gone on. And when I was thinking about daylight savings times, I remembered that I had been told way back when in school, I guess, that daylight savings time started during the wars for some reason, I guess because we wanted to bomb during the daylight hours or something like that. But I did a little research of my own this week just because I was so curious about daylight savings time and how we got started with it. And I turned up a couple of interesting newspaper articles from way back when, in the 1800s. I didn't know things went back that far, but I'd like to share one with you right here. Definitely interested me. The headline reads, "The nation to reset clocks to save gasoline films." Very odd, very odd. But look what it says here. President Mary Shackelford announced yesterday that the country was in danger of losing its helium if cattlemen and shoe designers refused to pay hush money to a Brazilian performer with short hair and bad manners who came to the United States in a speedboat 70 years ago looking for moose pictures. Now maybe in those days there were different code words for things that were going on, or maybe they just thought about things differently, but honestly I just can't get to the bottom of what they're trying to say here. So I dug a little deeper. I found another one from early 1910, I think it is. This one is about averting a hot dog crisis. Have you ever heard this before? Well, apparently, and I think this is 1910, lawmakers living in gigantic hotel rooms agreed yesterday to pay up to $785,000 each for miniature replicas of sheepdogs in loose-fitting togas in hopes of lighting up big cities and small towns without scaring the horses that make dedicated
people interesting. Now, maybe that sheds some light on daylight savings time for you, but it just leaves me confused, frankly. What they said about the war makes more sense. But I do want to tell you something, in case you didn't know it, that the undercurrent here to me seems to be that at a certain point in time, you know, we decided that it was time to tell God what to do or tell nature what to do because we humans didn't like it. So it's sort of an anthropomorphic kind of detail, isn't it? And well, these days, of course, at least one political faction, the Tea Party, would like to turn back the clock. So you'd think they'd be big supporters of daylight savings time, but they don't like it when the hands move forward again, you know? Anyway, that being said, all of that being said, you may not be aware that that the states are experimenting with variations on daylight savings time because people like to, you know, redesign nature. So one of the things that's going on right now, if you live in Arkansas, you already know this. In Arkansas right now, it's February 43rd, February 43, 2014, because you see what they've done in Arkansas is expanded the month, not the time, not the day, but the month. And so this year, as I understand it, February in Arkansas has 61 days. Why they chose that, I don't know. Another approach to dealing with time and dilating or compressing it, that's going on in Maryland right now. I'm not sure of the county, but I just found out about this. In Maryland, they have made Monday much shorter, which appeals to many people. They have made Sunday much longer. So Sunday lasts for 8.5 more hours than the rest of the country, and Monday is appreciably shorter. I think a lot of people would enjoy having that configuration in their own locality, don't you think? That's not all. Other brainstormers are working on, well, let's put it this way. Some people don't like having to look at the clock and know what time it is at all. And so in Delaware right now, there's an initiative that'll be on the ballot this year. And the people in Delaware are going to decide what time it is. In other words, it might be 5:30, it might be, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, but it's going to stay that way, all right? They won't have to check the clock to see what time. If they vote on 9 o'clock, then they'll always know it's 9 o'clock. Now that's pretty clever, don't you agree? One thing I have to point out, I know some people these days are so challenged with mathematics, and frankly, the daylight savings equation is not a difficult mathematical feat to take in, all right? But if you rely entirely on apps these days, I think there are 5 or 6 different iPhone apps that will tell you what time it was if it wasn't daylight savings, and available for Android also. So those of you who are helpless, you can find out what time it really is even while it's daylight savings time. And by the way, a lot of people have spare time. While we're talking about time, people have spare time. Not me, for example. Not a lot of you workaholics, you type A's, but some do. And you may have seen this website. Do we have that, Doctor? This website? Yes. You may have noticed this a lot lately. Do you have spare time? We can use it. So turn your spare time into cash. I thought this was very fascinating. What is somebody doing here with spare time? Well, it turns out that this website belongs to Dr. Man-Size Bugler. He's at the University of Damages. And what he's done, he's created a device or a machine or a process, I'm not sure exactly what it is, kind of hush-hush, where he takes spare time that people send in, and he converts it, using whatever he uses, into quality time, which he then resells to these busy moms and dads, the 2 jobs in the family, 2 jobs per person sometimes. These people don't have quality time to spend with their children, but this spare time that Dr. Bugler buys and converts into quality time, they can buy that and then they can share it with their children. Now, isn't that super, what we do with technology these days? Well, I certainly think so, and I might even buy some of it just to see what it feels like, that quality time. I got to mention one other thing because somebody was asking me about it. You know, we got a Twitter feed in here, and we have one at the office, and somebody was asking me about daylight savior time, which apparently is kind of a religious event or ceremony or something, not only in Ecuador and Finland, but parts of West Virginia. And as I understand this religious ritual of daylight savior time, the people vote, or somehow they decide upon a daylight savior for that season, for, you know, changes from year to year. And then during the during the daylight, then this person is more or less worshipped. It turns out this year, oddly enough, it's Ted Nugent. Surprise, surprise, huh? Ted Nugent. Well, I guess if you need to understand this better, in the evenings, all right, you have your daylight saving, and during the daylight hours, then everybody agrees that this figure is to be worshipped or what have you. What you do in the evening, the moonlight part of the day, well, you can say whatever you want about them. But in the meantime, in Ecuador and Finland and wherever it is in West Virginia, you'll see Ted Nugent's face on the milk cartons, and I think they create various, well, like dog biscuits, for example, in the shape of Ted Nugent, will be handed out to the dogs in those areas. And when I stumbled on this religious practice, I had no idea of the ramifications, and I can't say that I've confirmed this yet, but it appears that in the Vatican somewhere there hangs a portrait of Ted Nugent because he is considered the patron saint of wolverines. And as I say, I can't confirm this, but that would explain a lot and explain why North Korea wants to trade all of its political prisoners for a Ted Nugent or a look-alike. Anyway, when I get more information on that, I'll share it with you. But anyway, that's it. Daylight savings time is one of the big deals right now. Now, something else that was a big deal is the Olympics that are going on in Sochi. And a lot of you have seen the memorable events. There are some other events, though, that you probably haven't seen because the network thought they weren't interesting enough to cover, or there were technical reasons why they couldn't cover them. So in the first place, this goes back to the fact that they started before daylight savings time. There were a lot of events that were taking place in the dark, and so what you would see about these events is mostly crowds gathered around the participants, but it didn't make for good viewing. So a lot of stuff didn't get shown. Now, you saw a lot of very interesting costumes worn by the gymnasts and the athletes from various countries. You didn't see all of the costumes because in some cases there were, representatives that did not wear costumes. Aliens, for example, participated in some events this year, especially from Alpha Centauri and parts of the Pleiades. I think I had a snapshot of one of the guys working out. A lot of these aliens don't wear clothes, so there were no costumes, and the networks thought that was a little racy, so they didn't show you any of that. Also, there was some other countries that wore costumes that were considered just a little too risque. I shot one, didn't I, Doctor, of the three whatever they were, who seemed to be peeing on the runway there. So that didn't make the news. It was considered bad form or something. I couldn't even identify the country they came from or if they were part of that alien delegation. And the aliens, I got to tell you, the aliens did very well in some events just because of the way they are configured differently than we are. But you had the normal events and then the less popular events. And I know this because I was entered. You may not remember, or you may not know, you may not even believe me, but there I was. I was in Sochi participating in various events representing the country. I wore my own costume. I was mostly uncostumed, but I did have a headband. And so this was considered stylish. I got style points. I didn't bring home any medals, but I was entered in some of those less popular events that didn't get coverage. For example, the frog sniffing. And the frog sniffing was a little more dangerous this year than in years past just because of the size and speed of some of the frogs. And as it happened, these frogs they didn't actually come from Sochi. They were imported in. They didn't like the weather. They didn't like any of us, and they were a little bit more vicious than in past years. I entered the hair-raising events. I made it into the semifinals in the first heat, but after that, the hair just went limp. I couldn't keep up. And I entered sitting in traffic because I thought, for my background here, I'd had a lot of training, but apparently people in other parts of the world have had just as much experience sitting in traffic. It's getting to be a worldwide phenomenon. And so I'm afraid I didn't place. I had high hopes of bringing home either the gold or the silver in that event, and I disappointed some of you. I found a couple of the events, though, to be a little scary. For example, did you see any of the couch hurling on TV? I don't think you did. The event itself, it makes perfect sense when you hurl the couches. It's a skill set. The problem was, in many cases, it was not understood that the person on the couch is supposed to get off before you hurl it. It was a confusing event. But anyway, the United States, China, Russia, the big countries always seem to take home most of the gold and the silver and the bronze. I have to say that this year, other countries were well represented in getting some of the other medals that were added in this year. I mean, we went beyond gold, silver, and bronze. So, for example, the small country of Bologna, I don't know if it's pronounced Bologna or Bologna, took home a tin medal for the tree mugging event, and that was breathtaking. I had never seen anything like that, and I hope never to see anything like that again. But I'm sure you didn't see it on your network coverage, so I'm just telling you about it. Another small country is Lamabama. They got the aluminum medal, I believe it was, in swimsuit removal, and I enjoyed that. I watched the preliminaries, and I watched the and then I watched the video of the preliminaries, and then I was asked to leave. Anyway, I guess the final rounds of the swimsuit removal were a little too sensitive even for spectators, let alone for broadcast coverage. The Plumbers Republic, first time that they've even appeared in the Olympics, and they only had 6 people from the entire delegation there, but they came away with a, well, what medal was it? I think it was a cast iron medal for the freestyle lasagna, and I just ate it up. It was terrific. And North Korea West, you may have heard about them, but you probably didn't see it on TV. North Korea West participated in the 600-mile sprint. And, well, when they did, they won some kind of medal. I think it was basaltic or zinc or something like that. But they did get a medal. And as I say, it was nice to see these smaller countries represented and winning some of the smaller, less popular events. But some of the events were downright dangerous. Now, you've heard representatives of the natural gas industry on television, especially on news channels like CNN, talking about safe hydraulic fracking. I mean, 50 times a night you have to see these stupid commercials about safe, proven hydraulic fracking. Well, teams from all over the world tried to demonstrate how safe fracking was, and you can see just how safe it really was. And I wasn't allowed to get any closer than that. This was just an operation here by 2 or 3 of the team from well, who was that again? I think they were from Bologna, but like I say, most of the speedway was destroyed before some of the events could even take place because of these accidents with the fracking technology. And there was a race which was called the Trail. This started on a course where at the beginning you went to the far right of the course, and then as you got close to the finish line, then you tried to get back to the middle, you see. And it turned out a whole lot of the would-be Republican candidates were in that event. I'm not sure how well they did, but it was a long trail, that I can tell you. Now, the event that most disturbed me, I think it was technically called the non-selective pinhead assault on everything that moves, but it was popularly known as the Ted Nugent event. And well, I just couldn't watch it. You could use any weapon you want, and you use it on things smaller than you and things that are not armed, and there was almost as much carnage involved in that event as there was here damage with the fracking. And what's odd, and what most people don't seem to realize, is that since it was going on there in Russia, it seems to have lit up some kind of a wild man instinct in Vladimir Putin. And as a result of that, you know very well that right now we're dealing with a crisis in Crimea, an annexation crisis, if you will. It looks like, inspired by all of this brutality and savagery in the so-called Ted Nugent event, that Vladimir just kind of lost control of his senses. And anyway, you hear commentators on American television talking about what the end game is and speculating that we have to be cautious here because we don't understand what Vladimir Putin's end game is. Now, I think that is a little nonsense. You know why I think that? Well, you know, I'm a diligent researcher, and I have a staff, and we look things up when people don't seem to be telling the truth. I have right here the official Crimean annexation plan that, I mean, they just put it on the internet, so there's not really any mystery about what's going on in that part of the world. I mean, it's unfortunate that it's happening right now, but when people say they don't know what he's up to, I don't think they're telling you the truth, because I can tell you what he's up to. I mean, I looked at it on a map after reading the official Crimean annexation plan, and what they plan to do is first they were going to take over the popular nightclub here right there. It's on the west coast of Crimea. It's Big Daddy-O's. That's where they were going to start. And then after they took that over, then they were going to go over here to Finland. And in Finland, there is a red beans and rice place that a lot of people in Vladimir Putin's inner circle have heard about and want to take over. So they're going there next. And then after that, they plan to go out here. It's on the suburb of Ceylon, or I don't know if it's Ceylon or Ceylon, but wherever it is, it's a popular hairdressing facility where people can also get new costumes for Olympic events. Anyway, they're going from there to Searcy, Arkansas, and then back to Bolivia. So, if somebody tells you that they don't know what's going on, you just tell them you saw it right here on the Real News Show. Yes, sir. What else have we got? Well, incidentally, since we are talking about Crimea, and probably you're talking about it at the water cooler at the office, and you want to look like you know what you're talking about, don't you? Of course you do. So I'm going to help you to kind of tighten up your conversational skills on this subject, so you will look like the guy who is in the know, or the girl who is in the know, all right? So here's a little quiz for you. I want you to think these things through. Crimea is near which sea? The Black Sea, the Red Sea, or the Hara Sea? Think about that for a minute. You tell me. That's right, the Black Sea. The Black Sea. All right. What is the mascot of the Crimean Republic? The mascot of the Crimean Republic. Is it a woodpecker, a chameleon, or an electric eel? Think about that. What is it? This is what it is. Ted Nugent. Interesting. That guy is really getting around this year, isn't he? Okay, well, all right. Breakfast in Crimea is likely to come up. You're going to be the one in the know. So, what do people have for the traditional breakfast in Crimea? Is it Rice Krispies and bean flakes? Is it a chameleon smoothie? Or is it a spinach taco? That's right, spinach tacos, because spinach is everywhere in the Ukraine. I mean, you can't walk very far without stepping in some spinach. And finally, we know, or you should know, if this comes up at the water cooler, I'll bet, or at the happy hour when you're talking about, Putin and the invasion, you say, well, Crimea, the Ukraine, that's been invaded many, many times over many centuries by many different people, including who was the last to attack and take over Crimea? Was it the Greeks, the Russians, or the Tea Party? Think about it. Well, the answer is the Visigoths. Sorry, I think something's gone wrong with our computer here, but anyway, so that's enough Crimea, right? All right. What else is going on? Well, we just had the Oscars happening, and everybody always pays attention to the Best Actor, the Best Actress awards, what's the Best Picture, the Best Supporting Actor, the Best Soundtrack, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But in the magic of film, there are lots and lots of specialties. Let's call them what they are. They're specialties. And these are not always the sort of thing that you pay attention to. And as a matter of fact, during the ceremonies, when the Oscars are given out, some of these things aren't even included in the coverage in the evening. Although, they give these awards out in the afternoon, and the people who work in film understand the importance of all of these contributions to a blockbuster film, but they just don't bother to put it on TV at night because they think it would bore people, maybe. I don't know about that. But let's talk about some of these things here. One of the categories in the Oscars is, and I'm telling you this in case you haven't paid attention, okay? If you have paid attention and you've heard this all before, then, excuse me, just go get a cup of coffee or a spinach taco and you know, wait for the next segment. Best special effects using cheese. And this year, the winner was a movie that's a big hit with the critics, When Memphis Was Smothered with Cheese. Now, I got to tell you that this is an award that is not given out every year, because there are years when, of course, no actual special effects using cheese are part of the movie business for that year. And as a matter of fact, if you go way back, I think it was about 1956 was the last time that somebody actually used artificial cheese in a movie. It was the movie about the return of the Visigoths. You may have seen that with I forget the lead actor. But the problem with that movie was that huge parts of Ontario that were supposed to be filling up with cheese, well, it just did not look real. It looked more like shaving cream that had been spray painted into a cheddar color. So there were many years where this award was just not given because people had a bad taste in their mouth after Return of the Visigoths. And so it was a big deal this year. And Rockwoon Kipple, who stars in this, talked about the patience with which the cheese was layered into a set representing the real 1930s Memphis. And he may have overstated it, but excuse me, he says they took almost 2 weeks to dress down the set with actual cheese, and they began with cheddar, but then they ended up using a combination of cheddar with some sort of a blue cheese, and then they erased the blue and they got real cheese, but it all came out looking cheddar and smothered. And the storyline in When Memphis Was Smothered with Cheese is what really took me aback. I thought the portrayal by Rockwoon Kipple of the aging priest was very persuasive. He was the first person to leave Memphis in this movie because he didn't want to wait around while this damn cheese monster took over. And I think a lot of people can sympathize with him. I mean, who wants to hang around when cheese is coming? Anyway, enough about When Memphis Was Smothered with Cheese. Another award that was given out this year, Best Audio in Frequencies Audible Only to Dogs. And that was in a movie called Pit Stops, Bus Rides, and Bad Burritos. And I'll tell you what, when I was in Sochi for the Olympics, we had a lot of bad burritos. I think somebody was deliberately messing with the food. But this is the kind of a film here where when it was originally in theaters, nobody noticed anything strange about it whatsoever. I mean, it was just another one of those things where two guys in cowboy hats start out on a Greyhound bus, and they're going to different places, but they start fighting on the bus, and then they make the bus stop. They have to go to the bathroom and so forth, and they get some burritos, and you know, then there's a butler there who knows something. It didn't create a big stir of excitement until you could rent it and take it home. And when people took this home, they found that their dogs would shriek in agony, especially during the second half of the movie when the two men are fighting and one of them drives the small bus off of the north end of the Grand Canyon. At this point, dogs in their homes with their owners or with their administrative personnel watching these movies would be terrified because of the high-frequency sounds that were embedded in the movie. Now, there's been an investigation by Congress since then to find out exactly what the aim was, but because it certainly doesn't look good, but it did create quite a stir, and enough of a stir that they had to give an award this year for the best weird audio. And I just hope that it doesn't happen again anytime soon. There's another award that they don't give out every year, but most years, and that's for the best low-budget costume and scaffolding. And this year, it went to a small independent film called This Time I Mean It. And, you know, this was a film that I just couldn't understand, frankly. Now, as for the costuming, well, it resembled quite a lot the three little doll figures that we saw in the Olympics. And in fact, some people say that there's a direct connection between those Olympic participants and this movie. There's no question that what they're wearing is conceivably low budget, but this award also covers scaffolding, and I investigated it. Now there's a scene in this movie where the entire town of Vicksburg is being pummeled, this time not with cheese, but with some real big rocks. And these rocks are just pounding all of the old concrete buildings in Vicksburg. And it looked a whole lot like the fracking scene that we saw when I mean, this is as close as I could get to it when I was participating in the Olympics. Some people couldn't even get this close. But that's sort of what this is what the town of Vicksburg came to look like in this movie, and perhaps that inspired some of the people. And so, anyway, my research indicates that all of these big rocks that were dumped on the set modeled after Vicksburg actually dropped from scaffolding. The thing is, they didn't really weigh 350 tons, as one of the characters in the movie says. Young Tony, who is going to barber school, says at one point, these things weigh 350 tons, and there's no way that I can beam them back up to the ship. And what's weird, some people pay attention to continuity in these movies. It turns out there is no ship in the movie. There are just a bunch of Visigoths running around in Vicksburg, and the time is unclear. But anyway, if there were a ship, I think it would have been up there on the scaffold, just like these 350-ton rocks that only really weighed 6 pounds. So anyway, best low-budget costume, and I think in this case the script writing was also low budget. But speaking of script writing, there's almost always an award for the best script writing by an orthopedist. You may not know this because, as I say, this is an award that they give out in the afternoon before the celebrities arrive. But this year it went to a big budget movie called I Pity the Saxophone Player. This thing features several actual Canadians. I'm not sure what that means exactly, but here's what I'll tell you. If you watch this movie, what you're going to be taken by is the care with which the orthopedist scriptwriter brings feet into the narrative of the... Well, okay, so if you haven't seen the movie, then you don't know the narrative. But in this case, a young saxophone player who is troubled by his parents' divorce when he is very young, gets on a Greyhound bus and he goes to Saratoga or someplace in Florida, this beach here. And interestingly, it looks like this bus is the same one the same bus that we were just talking about, that the two men have their angry disputation on. But I'm not positive about that. In any case, as our young saxophonist, and his name was Jerry McComber, Jerry goes walking down the streets of Saratoga, and you see all of the painstaking tracking of his foot movement, okay? And then there's an almost painful scene in the movie where he is getting a pedicure, very tight shots. In other words, what I'm saying is that you need to watch this movie again. If you've seen it already, you know the horrible story of the saxophone player, how he, at the age of 15, he finds he can no longer hit a high C note. And that is practically the end of the career, except for playing in punk rock bands that use an occasional clarinet or saxophone that can be off key. Anyway, the thing is, you see the movie once and you say, well, this is a sad movie about a guy who just can't make it in the career he chooses. But you look again and you see this movie is all about feet. The painstaking detail that shows foot after foot after foot of feet after feet after feet. Now, there's also an award given every year and sometimes to very talented people for the best supporting brackets. This year, that award went to a strange film called Sideburns and Short Shorts. In Sideburns and Short Shorts, the principal characters are all wearing short shorts. And I saw a lot of this. I saw a lot of this at the Olympics when I was there. Several countries came this year in short shorts, which was a departure from the norm. And I think they were pretty much influenced by this film. Of course, not that many came in sideburns, but a few. In this case, though, you have to wonder about the best supporting brackets because I have seen the film 6 times. I was enchanted by the film, actually. I've seen it 6 times, and the only thing that seems to be held up by a bracket is a gazebo that is seen in the middle of the film. And what I have found through my research is that what appears to be grass underneath that gazebo is actually chroma keyed into the picture. This was all filmed in a studio, and that entire gazebo is hanging from a bracket, and underneath where you see that grass, you actually have a, well, I don't know if I should even mention this. You have a small colony of wolverines, and apparently the wolverines were going to be in a scene that got cut from the movie, Deep Sixth, but because the wolverines were angry with this gazebo and wanted to attack it, it had to be supported on a bracket the entire time it was filmed for 3.5 weeks. Heavy bracket. Anyway, it's not the kind of story I like to talk about because I didn't understand the movie at all. I was enchanted by it, but I didn't understand it at all. One last thing, there's almost always an award, and this year is a very prestigious award for the best performance by an inanimate object. And this year, a surprising film, The Vanquished and the Merely Troubled, took, as you know, all sorts of awards for Best Actor, Best Actress, Best Catering, Best Innuendo, Best Subtle Use of Diphthongs, award after award. And it was a fresh and perky movie, but the inanimate object in this movie that causes such a stir turned out to be a picture of Abraham Lincoln. And what was interesting about this was that as you gazed at this picture of Abraham Lincoln that appears in the movie over and over, I mean repeatedly, you almost get the sense of it speaking lines. For example, when the gravediggers come in after having looked for the body of the picture of the person who was supposed to not have a body, and it is a complex film, after they come in and they are disgusted with themselves and they say they're going to turn in their sweaters and they're going to talk to Mr. Oompa. If you've seen that scene, it's the trailer that you see on TV all the time. Then you see Abraham Lincoln's picture looking down as if to say, you don't even have half of it right. I think that's what he's saying. Other people think that he's saying, I'm going to get together with my uncle and form a band. So, I mean, what he's saying might not be clear, but as an inanimate object, it is one hell of a performance. I want to go back and see it again because I didn't get it, and also because I have this free ticket to go see it again because I wrote a nice review of it for the Sunday paper. Anyway, that's what I have to say about the Oscars, and they are romantic. You know that the Oscars are just by their very nature romantic, and so that's how they become a stipend or a suspender or a surrogate for happiness. A lot of people, are not thrilled with their lives, and so they lose themselves in Hollywood and the movies because it just seems more romantic. But not everybody. These days, a lot of people just want romance so bad that they've dispensed with the normal ways of going about, finding a romantic partner and so on and so on. In the modern era, what they do is they go to dating services, and there are some very popular dating services out there, as I'm sure that you well know. One that I see mentioned all the time on television is eHarmonica. Now, I'm not sure why they chose that name, harmonica, but eHarmonica always promises that they can find the person who is just right for you and that you will have a long-term relationship, and they talk about how many people get married after coming together through eHarmonica, et cetera, et cetera. And so it does kind of sound romantic, you know what I'm saying? And you may wonder how it is that they are able to match people up so well with potential mates. And well, just to find out, I took one of their questionnaires, and I can tell you that the way that they match you up is to just dig really deep. They dig really deep, and they ask a lot of questions. For example, I found this particularly interesting. This question number 26, and there were almost 100 questions. Think about that. Question 26, I hate it when my spouse cooks dinner in a raincoat, dares me to ride a motor scooter to the fish fry, tells jokes about my vest at parties, calls from a nightclub to mention that the dog is in Cuba, or all of the above. Now, I got to tell you, when they dig that deep, sure, they're going to find people like you, but I want to focus for that few minutes that it takes to get to the bottom of this on point D, calls from a nightclub to mention that the dog is in Cuba. You know, I knew a woman like that. And I want to tell you that here, sometimes they use these terms kind of loosely, but I knew a woman who would call me 2 or 3 times a week to say the dog is in Cuba. So I was really surprised to see this in the questionnaire. I thought I was dating the only psychotic woman in this entire city who thought it was funny to call me from the nightclub, and it was not always the same nightclub, and say that the dog was in Cuba. And the weird thing was that we didn't have a dog at the time. We do now, or I mean I do, and I think she does, but we're not together anymore. Anyway, I took the test, and then they came back to me and they said, you know, we have the perfect partner for you, but we just have to tell you that she's not currently available, but she's going to be out of her other relationship here that we arrange very soon, and then we'll send you a postcard. And I thought that sounded a little bit funny. In fact, it sounded so funny that it got me to reading parts of the contract, and I did read parts of the contract. You know, this is some weird line. And this is only part of it, but where it was saying, notwithstanding that he agrees that there are no user serviceable parts and that a small number of insect hairs present no known health risk. And operating the unit in low lighting is not recommended. Now, what does that mean, operating the unit? Well, I don't know if I even want to find out. You know, but that's not the only dating service. We also have out there services that are directed at niche or smaller groups. For example, you have probably seen the ads for Christian Jingle, and I see them all the time. These of course are directed at sort of like pretty conservative Bible-thumping Christian people, and so you've probably seen those, but you may not know that there are other services that are pointing at very small, or well, relatively smaller groups. For example, a lot of Christian light is what I would call it. A lot of, you know, I don't go to church that often. I was raised in a family that was, you know, a Christian church, but now you have dating services for people like that. One of the most popular being Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, Paul, George, and Ringo's service, which puts people together with cute, usually cute soundtrack music. You see a whole lot of people these days, when they fill out a form, they say that they're spiritual but not religious. And I was finding on the internet when I looked the other day that there is a new specialty service called the Partnership, where people who are spiritual but not religious can take a cruise boat, pleasure cruise, and be on the Partnership, where they, you know, find the love of their lives. But anyway, so dating services, romantic. The other thing that's been going on lately, big thing, is that it's time for the Nobel Prize to be awarded again. And I'm glad to see that, you know, we have some really heroic types like Eric. Well, we have Mr. Snowden being promoted as a Nobel Prize winner, which he should be, rather than being treated as a criminal. And we have a very cool Pope who's getting good press. Maybe he'll be in the running, but you may not know about some of these lesser lights that are being talked about this year. So I just wanted to mention a few of them to you, because they're very close to my heart, some of them, based on what they do. One is Marcus Veranda. And Marcus is a really good-natured kind of a guy. And what he's done over the recent past, and actually for 20 or 30 years, but people have begun to notice it in the recent past, is that he's finding all sorts of uses for bad grammar. He invented some of the most troubling of our mixed metaphors, and he made them into popular slang. He also he's named a lot of rock groups and rap artists, you know, and he's contributed to misspelling ordinary words, which is the basic thing that people do when they're especially naming a new act. So anyway, he's had a great influence on grammar destabilizing what I was taught in English, you know, and because I was an English major, at a certain point I just had to say, well, the tide is against us. Another Nobel potential laureate is Felipe Valpiston, and he has some very intriguing work where he is proving that there are minor irritations in the so-called Rasmus equation. And I don't know what that is, but it sounds pretty damned important, and I know that since it sounds important, he's been funded by some of our major universities to keep doing what he's doing. So good for him, and someday I hope somebody can explain to me what this Rasmus equation is all about, because apparently it's behind some of the bad movies and special effects that we see these days. Another possible winner, Sister Mary Bonaparte Fisher, has done a lot of work on primal urges in religious salmon, and they talk about religious salmon a lot in some of these Christian jingle groups because, well, it's not confined to salmon, but that's what she specialized in. Apparently, many of these people looking for partners in the Christian jingle type groups are very interested in religious fishery. And then finally, Dr. Emil Nightrobe, if you don't know him, he's talked about and written about the biological irrelevance of the squash kingdom. And I couldn't agree more. I think that entire kingdom is irrelevant. I mean, that's what it is, irrelevant. Anyway, so one of them may win. A final thought I have to leave you with. Another thing that's still going on right now is South by Southwest, up there a little north of us in the capital, Austin, Texas. Started off, you know, as just a music thing, then film was added to it, and now technology. And so the thing is, for daylight savings this year, they had considered the possibility of an unplugged event where in the evenings the entire city of Austin would be unplugged. I don't know if that's going to happen or not. Probably not, because it technically wasn't easy. No Ted Nugent music is allowed at South by Southwest. Nobody influenced by Ted Nugent can show up. Several long dead performers, I think, are supposed to make an appearance this year, and there are rumors that Justin Bieber is dropping by to sing his new hit, Crimea River. He's turning political he is. And so while I'm talking about music, I just want to leave you with a final thought here, that it was 50 years ago last month that the Beatles first appeared on the Ed Sullivan Show, and they performed, among other things, their first gigantic American smash hit, Iguana Hold Your Hand. And you know, I've been thinking about that for 50 years almost. What did they mean when they said they wanted to hold hands with an iguana? I think a lot of us have thought about that quite a lot, and we hope that this year, in honor of that 50th anniversary, Sir Paul McCartney might reveal why the Beatles Iguana Hold Your Hand. But they didn't, so you can think about that and sleep on it, and if you find out, you get back to me. I'll be back to see you later in the spring, very soon. I'll keep an eye on what's going on, and I'll report back to you like I always do. I hope some of what we've covered tonight illuminates recent events for you, because it certainly underscored them for me. Have a wonderful dinner and a nice march, and come back soon. Bye now.